Chinese leader Xi Jinping had high hopes that China's global infrastructure investments would help expand Beijing's influence around the world.
共建“一带一路”一定会迎来一个更加美好的世界。
But with projects stalled and tens of billions of dollars of loans going sour, Chinese officials are now reining in China's massive Belt and Road program. So let's take a look at where things went wrong and 5 ways that Chinese officials may retool Belt and Road to try to fix it. Around the world, you can literally see how the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, has run into problems. International airports built with Chinese money are empty. Deepwater ports are underutilized. And construction on some transportation projects has been crawling. Some projects that are up and running have saddled poorer countries with billions of dollars worth of debt, which has prompted Belt and Road backlash in some places. To understand why there have been so many problems, I called my colleague George Downs, who's been taking a closer look at a troubled transportation project. What do you got for me, George?
So check this out, Shelby. This is obviously a giraffe in the middle of Kenya, and running through the background is a Chinese-built railway. China won the contract because nobody else was allowed to bid. And China's Exim Bank created a loan that funded like 90% of it.
So, obvious question, is the railway making money?
It's really struggled to. It just hasn't carried as much cargo as it needs to turn a profit.
So now Kenya owes China a bunch of money.
A bunch of money. And it has a railway line that's kind of a bit of a thorn in its side.
To learn more about that railway project, check out George's video here. Like many countries, Kenya is now struggling to pay China back just as its economy faces challenges like high inflation and rising interest rates. Some Western leaders have called China's lending practices debt trap diplomacy, an embarrassment to Beijing. In a statement this summer, China's ambassador to Kenya said those allegations were pure disinformation. The Kenyan government didn't respond to questions about our story. Now, not all of China's investments have been a bust. In fact, another project in Kenya, this superhighway, has been economically viable and has improved commuting times by more than an hour, according to researchers at William & Mary's Aid Data Research Lab. But as those earlier examples show, the complex and nearly impossible to track Belt and Road Initiative has run into some major trouble.
Obviously, the fact that the program now needs to be retooled shows the limits to Xi Jinping's ambitions of reshaping the global order with Chinese money.
And that's why Chinese officials are pivoting to Belt and Road 2.0, something WSJ's chief China correspondent Ling Wei says is a priority at the highest levels of the Chinese government.
The Chinese now want to be more prudent and more selective in terms of who they lend money to.
So here are 5 ways that Belt and Road could change, according to researchers who study the program and people familiar with policymaking in Beijing. First, a slimmer portfolio. Chinese banks have already sharply reduced lending in low-income countries, and for now, they've stopped investing in some countries altogether, like Russia and Egypt. That's according to a report by the Green Finance and Development Center at Fudan University in Shanghai. Secondly, Chinese banks are likely to favor smaller, more nimble projects, like hydropower plants and solar farms, and move away from financing mega projects, like that railway in Kenya. Third, they'll probably invest more in digital infrastructure, like 5G networks, and less in hard infrastructure, like roads and ports. Already, Belt and Road engagement in the tech sector has increased 300% compared to last year, according to that Fudan University study. Fourth, the ways in which China finances projects is also likely to shift. For example, instead of lending directly to central governments, which report public debt on government balance sheets, Chinese banks are likely to invest more in public-private partnerships. And Chinese banks could syndicate more loans, which essentially allows them to share more risk with other financial institutions. These practices could help China avoid bad investments, and they could potentially help root out corruption among the governments that borrow money from China. But researchers say host governments could still be on the hook for what they call hidden public debt. And fifth, experts say that China may need to start giving more money in the form of aid and less money in the form of loans if they want Belt and Road to be sustainable. According to an analysis by Aid Data, China has provided $9 of debt for every $1 of aid to low and middle income countries. It's the opposite for the United States, which provides $9 of aid for every $1 of debt. But there are some major challenges when it comes to this Belt and Road overhaul. In order for China to move forward, experts say it'll have to renegotiate debt and potentially even accept some losses when it comes to the countries that already owe it money. Economists estimate that nearly 60% of China's overseas loans are now held by countries considered to be in economic distress. And some of those countries, like Sri Lanka and Zambia, are already experiencing debt crises.
Bad loans really are piling up. They have to deal with it.
If China is too lenient with those countries, it could stoke tensions at home, where Chinese officials, facing a property crisis, have resisted bailing out the real estate sector. But if China refuses to take a haircut and accept losses, it could fuel anti-China sentiment abroad and jeopardize important political relationships. Plus, China now has competition on the global stage.
We think that there's a much more equitable way to provide for the needs of countries around the world.
The US and G7 nations announced a Build Back Better World partnership last year aimed at countering China by addressing infrastructure needs in the developing world in a transparent and values-driven way. Whatever happens, Ling says that Belt and Road isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Chinese leaders, including Xi Jinping himself, still see it as playing an important role in promoting China on the world stage.